If you are someone who is sick of falling headlong into relationships only to wind up feeling kind of bored or smothered or terrified of hurting your partner just when things are supposed to be getting good, then this is the video that you are going to want to watch, because I am going to explore 4 strengths of individuals with avoidant attachment, what I refer to as rolling stones. And so today, we're going to hone in on some cognitive reframing by helping you to shift your conscious perspective regarding avoidant attachment. I describe individuals who have avoidant attachment as rolling stones because the language that we often use in the attachment literature, like avoidant, for example, can be kind of judgy, and it can be a bit predictive of the outcome for that person. And I think that that is irresponsible in a way. And so I use the term rolling stones because I feel it is a gentler, more affectionate term to use. And I also find that it's a term that often individuals with avoidant attachment prefer. So this condition of having avoidant attachment, what I'm going to refer to as a rolling stone attachment style, is a circumstance in which you may feel a great sense of strain, suffocation, confusion, or intrusion when it comes to deeply intimate relationships. And so there's also an underlying fear of abandonment or rejection, as well as fears of being weak or not worthy. And so for the rolling stone, there's an essential disconnect from and a distrust of what I'm going to call the true self, the essential self, the transcendental self, if you like. Those who are more psychologically minded might prefer to think of it as the unconscious self. And so this distrust has led to feeling insecure and avoidant of intimate situations that stimulate those fears of vulnerability and or of being smothered and taken over and over-controlled by a partner. And so it can rear its head in adult romantic relationships, perhaps as a reliving of childhood wounds, particularly wounds that occurred amongst families where caretakers were either overly doting and emotionally controlling, invasive, and or oppressive, and lacking in personal boundaries. So sometimes this might be referred to as enmeshed family backgrounds. Or they may have belonged to a system in where there was a lot of dismissal or criticism of bids for contact, and parents were more emotionally distant. Or they might have had a situation where there was a little bit of both, and so the signals were confused. So this can be thought of as little t trauma or developmental trauma, as first coined by Bessel van der Kolk, who's a trauma specialist in Boston. And in some instances, there may be more severe trauma also present in a Rolling Stones background, and that means there's severe abuse, neglect, abandonment, significant illness, and things like that. So to sort of bullet this a bit more specifically, a Rolling Stone may struggle in the following ways. You may be accustomed to partners that demand too much of you, so you become sensitive to even benign requests. You tend to view generosity as a form of emotional manipulation, that it is trying to obligate you to reciprocate more than you're actually comfortable giving. You may anticipate being blamed for when things go wrong in a relationship, and so you kind of head it off by avoiding taking on too much responsibility or commitment to begin with. You might be described as having a fear of commitment, but often that's only because you take commitment quite seriously. And when and if you do finally decide to commit to something, you want to make sure there are not the chains of obligation assigned to it. Commitment and obligation are not actually quite the same thing. Commitment is something that you choose of your own free will. It's something that you continue to do from a place of choice, as opposed to obligation, which is something you feel like you have to do. Now, you might be considered aloof or emotionally distant, but when you do feel things, it's likely that you feel them very intensely. Sometimes so much, in fact, that it could scare you. It might even be hard to identify the feeling, let alone express it articulately. So you may try your best to kind of shut it down before it overwhelms you. You may also struggle with perfectionism and a fear of failure, but perhaps you act just the opposite so as to avoid appearing too weak or vulnerable. Deep down, you might believe that you have to earn love and approval, and so you're drawn to partners who are edgy or challenging and that make you kind of work for it. Now, on the other hand, a partner, if they give their love too freely, then you find them too boring or too nice, and you kind of question your ability to make them happy. You tend to fall into relationships rather quickly. Maybe you do have a level of dismissiveness around your emotions, but you also can be quite romantic when you want to be. And typically after about, let's say, 3 to 6 months, you may find that it's almost as if a light switch is inside of you and all you can focus on are the flaws in your partner in the relationship. And you start thinking about all the missed opportunities out there. And if your partner flirts with someone else or expresses a need for space to you, you feel more of a sense of relief at first, though it may be followed by a need to test them. You may also struggle with forms of addiction. That could be drug abuse, alcohol abuse, food addictions, shopping addictions, hoarding, gaming, other types of compulsive addictions as well. But the hardest thing for a rolling stone, I would say, is that they usually attract partners who have insecure attachment styles as well. And so they fall into what's called the anxious avoidant trap more often than not. And that's a circumstance where you typically find yourself in partnership with someone that is emotionally dependent upon you. And that inevitably proves your sort of pessimistic perspective on love, which is that love comes at the cost of personal freedom. Let's talk about the Rolling Stone in partnership specifically. So as a Rolling Stone, you might be attracted to individuals that admire you for the things that you value in yourself and others as well. So that could be a strong work ethic, analytical abilities, high quality performance, a need to right wrongs. But you might be particularly attracted to those that express these values in dimensions that are dissimilar to your own, and therefore it would allow you to experience those values more fully through your partner. So for example, the hardworking stockbroker is attracted to the hardworking artist. The analytical engineer is attracted to the analytical literature professor. The high-performing surgeon is attracted to the naturopath with a successful business. The hard-nosed prosecutor is attracted to the animal rights activist who just doesn't back down. So you may feel reserved in your emotional expression, maybe even believe that if you allow yourself to become overly emotional, you'll become weak or lose control of yourself. But paradoxically, however, you tend to find a wide emotional range attractive and inspiring in your romantic partners. And you may even need your partners to be somewhat colorful or sparky in order to feel that special chemistry between you. The deeper and more intimate that your feelings become for this partner, the more out of control you might start to feel. And it's also hard for you to feel confident in accurately labeling your feelings and verbally expressing them out loud. So you start to increasingly feel anxious and smothered and need to put distance between you and your partner to make that go away. And again, this may turn into finding fault with your partner for every little thing while downplaying and dismissing what feelings you do have for them. Or it could look like idealizing and romanticizing your partner as somehow morally superior to you. And so then you struggle to understand how you could possibly make them happy or deserve them. And so you start questioning, well, what is love anyway? How would I know if I even felt it? And then struggle to see yourself really living up to the task of a healthy relationship. And so in turn, your partner only becomes more needy of reassurance, and they start behaving in a way that is overly controlling and manipulative in a desperate attempt to re-engage you. And of course, that only exacerbates your desperate need to walk away even faster, even if you do still have feelings for them. And so alternatively, almost like overnight, your amorous feelings kind of turn off. And you don't really dig too deeply into it. You assume it must be because of a flaw in your partner, or somehow the chemistry is just off. So it might sound something like this. A partner says, I think I'm falling in love with you. And you think to yourself, oof, you are going to be disappointed. Partner says, I wish we could spend more time together. And then you find yourself thinking, don't you want to give me a chance to miss you? Partner might say, so-and-so was flirting with me. Does it make you jealous? And you might think, oh, what a relief, someone else to take the pressure off. Partner might say, are we going to make things exclusive? I really need to know if this is going somewhere. And you're probably feeling, ooh, I'm feeling really smothered right now, and I would rather keep my options open. I like to emphasize the strengths of every attachment style because I think we have a tendency to fall into negative cyclical thinking, automatic negative thoughts. And when we do that, we really cut off the possibilities for ourselves and for our partners. So I want to emphasize the strengths here for the rolling stone. And so while a lot of what we discuss is kind of like the problem that avoidance can create in relationships, there really are tremendous skills and abilities that evolve as a result of this type of insecure attachment style. And so today I want to talk about 4 of them. So the first one is a strong work ethic. I have noticed that Rolling Stones often know how to get the job done, and they are not shy about rolling up their sleeves when it comes to something with a clear problem and solution. When put to the task, Rolling Stones tend to tackle a problem and they complete it with conviction. A Rolling Stone is also likely someone who believes if you want something done right, you got to do it yourself. And they feel really good about themselves when they have successfully completed something. Now, again, sometimes our greatest strengths can also be our greatest weaknesses, however. And so a Rolling Stone may fall into workaholism as a way of avoiding their emotional needs, or they might struggle to delegate and wind up feeling kind of burned out and or sabotaging their own success. Now, the second strength would be analytical problem solving. So Rolling Stones are often methodical and analytical in their approach to all things. They tend to derive a strong sense of self-esteem and efficacy from their ability to intellectualize and to be rational without letting their emotions get the better of them. And so they may even be relied upon for this and can be great thinkers and conceptual problem solvers. And because of this, they might appear to be calm and even-keeled. It also creates the appearance that a Rolling Stone doesn't take things too personally often, and so friends might describe them as really good listeners. Now, on the shadow side of this, however, all that analysis can sometimes leave them with a lot of energy in their heads, spinning their wheels, trying to think their way out of something when it would be far better to feel their way through it instead. And so additionally, the overanalysis and emphasis on methodology can leave them in this kind of chronic fix-it mode, which might involve some compulsive tendencies. And lastly, sometimes the calmness and not taking things too personally can actually come across to folks as evidence of not caring or being too aloof, let's say. Now, the third strength here is they are really good in a crisis. Perhaps because of their ability to analyze and problem solve, Rolling Stones are also often really good in crisis situations. Imagine the emergency room doctor who has to turn off their feelings so that they can take quick and decisive action, avoiding emotional paralysis. They might even be drawn into high risk or thrilling careers because they may get a rush from the adrenaline as a form of acceptable emotional stimulation. Or they might enjoy a high-profile position and derive a sense of personal value from their material successes and professional acknowledgement. Now, on the other hand, this inner compulsion towards being performance-driven could also be so powerful that it scares them, in which case they lock it down, and instead they might appear lazy or apathetic, kind of shying away from challenging work or tasks that carry a high degree of responsibility assigned to them. And so a painful, if cleverly disguised, streak of perfectionism might actually paralyze them from taking real risks for the fear of failing miserably under that high pressure and incurring shameful feelings about it. Now, the fourth strength is they are often champions of the underdog. While often appearing kind of aloof in intimate situations, a lot of Rolling Stones might also believe in the greater good and have a soft spot for animals and or people in need. And this could be just a secondary characteristic and express itself more privately, or it could motivate them so much that they become defenders and organizers of any group that they perceive to be an underdog. So in some ways, this actually keeps people at a distance because even though the Rolling Stone may be acting on someone's behalf, it's in a larger group rather than in an intimate one-to-one situation, such as in a romantic relationship. And so this creates a respectable and acceptable kind of shield that satisfies some social and emotional needs while hiding a deeper inner turmoil, which perhaps is only vaguely acknowledged. And so this shield or mask is kind of like an interface that makes it easier to interact with others and prevents things in the Rolling Stone social life from becoming too complicated. This also tends to make Rolling Stones kind of irresistible to open hearts, who are drawn to the Rolling Stones' strength, independent attitude, and charisma, and the desire to fulfill the Rolling Stones' emotional needs. So those are 4 strengths for the Rolling Stone. Sometimes when you are at this place where you're like, I'm going crazy, I'm going to give up and walk away, you've got a lot of momentum tied up in it. Okay. And you've got a lot of, you're usually operating under a lot of false premises that you need that person to change in order for you to be happy. And so there's a premise there, which is that it's all up to your partner to fix themselves, to fix this relationship, to be what you need and want them to be in order for you to be happy. And that's a tremendous amount of responsibility. When you can start stepping into creating a life that you are on fire about for yourself, when you find that whatever is going on in your life and whatever your passions and your interests are as engaging and engrossing and fulfilling to you as being in relationship to this person, and you can start to redirect some of all that momentum towards these pursuits that you have going on for yourself, then the other person is going to feel like, oh, it's not all on me. It's safe to be in this relationship, and I'm not feeling locked in a corner anymore. Like, that's a Rolling Stones perspective. And so, as it was mentioned here, when I started giving my Rolling Stone even more space than they asked for, then they started to feel like they could come towards me. And this is the result of what I think of as emotional crowding. So when you're an anxious person and an open heart and you're spinning around like this and you're like, I need all this, I need reassurance, I need them to do this, I need them to do that, otherwise I can't feel secure and safe within myself, you're creating all this momentum and you're filling up this space. And they're gonna close up. They're gonna clam up. It's gonna drive you crazy, because then you're gonna think, well, I'm just gonna try harder. I'm gonna give them ultimatums. I'm gonna withdraw and see how they like that. And you're trying all these methods. I'm gonna hurt myself and make them feel bad about it. You're trying all these different mechanisms to try to get them to do what you want them to do. And it's a preoccupation with control, because you don't believe that in and of yourself you are good enough and that you will be fine, and that if you can allow yourself to know yourself well enough to have passions and pursuits outside of being in relationship to this person, that it's okay to allow those things to move through you, to allow that person to move through you, that you will be fine no matter what. You will be on fire about life no matter what, because whatever's going on in your life is as interesting to you as whatever's going on in somebody else's life. But it takes time. It takes time. And you can't force yourself not to think about someone, because whether you are pushing or pulling against something, you are adding more momentum to that thing. So you just got to let it run. You just got to let it run, but you got to start blazing a new trail, a new path in a direction of something that you like and that is completely for yourself. That is completely something that makes you feel fulfilled and brings you joy. And as you start doing that, this is going to start picking up more momentum. And then it will start getting more and more and more. It'll get better and better and better for you. And all of a sudden, all the energy you had tied up over here is going to start moving over here and be like, oh, that's more interesting. That feels better. That's something that actually takes me in a direction that I'm enjoying, as opposed to hanging out here where I feel miserable and beating myself up for not being good enough. And now for the Rolling Stone, once you're able to start doing this, now they're like, your sort of assertion of self-sovereignty and you having that self-definition is going to attract the Rolling Stone back, because they're just like, oh, whew, whew, now it's not all on me, because there's no way I could ever live up to all of that. So the irony is sometimes it will call them back, in the sense that you're not emotionally crowding them out anymore. You're actually creating space for them now. A lot of times the anxious open hearts kind of want to crack their partners open like a nut. They want to plant that seed, and they kind of pull at the roots and they pull at the buds to get it to grow faster. Where a Rolling Stone, truly, they're like a fine wine. A Rolling Stone is like a fine wine. You got to let that relationship grow and age over time. It gets better with time. You got to give it time and allow it to be the sun in the water, in the soil, and create that safe space in the relationship so that the Rolling Stone can bloom into it. This is what the rolling stone needs. And if you come at them like this, and you give them ultimatums, and you invade their space, and you stalk them, they are going to feel assaulted. In some way, it's called, I think of it as emotional crowding, which is a gentler way of thinking it. An avoidant rolling stone is going to feel assaulted, really. And they know you don't mean to. No one's saying you mean to do that or you mean to make them feel that way, but that's how they're going to feel.